Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next session. Really excited to have both Saira and Melanie with us today. So I'm going to turn it over to them so they can introduce themselves and share all the things they're going to talk about, which I'm sure will be the third most mind-blowing session of the day. So turning it over. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Jen. I'm Melanie Davidson. I'm a political activist and impact investor, and worked with Saira on her 2018 congressional run.
And I'm Saira. I am a co-founder of a company called Race to Dinner, where me and my partner, Regina Jackson, a Black woman in Denver, where I live, do dinners with white women all over the world, now on Zoom, but outside of pandemics in real life, to talk about how white women's racism shows up. Also co-founder of a nonprofit that will be launching shortly, that will be a digital space and an in real life space, again, when we're out of COVID, for BIPOC women. Author of upcoming book, White Women, Everything You Already Know About Your Own Racism and How to Do Better. Penguin Random House will publish that next year. And like Mel said, I ran for Congress in 2018.
Yeah, so do you want to, we just kind of have an informal session. We're just going to talk through our experience there. And I kind of will kick off. I think Saira's got, a bulk of the, she was the candidate, she was the one who ran, but, from my experience, I was just to set the stage in a little bit of context. In 2016, like a lot of people, it really stung when Donald Trump won the US presidency. But I personally wasn't surprised. I mean, the days and weeks leading up to the election, I thought he was going to win. He lost the popular vote by 3 million, but got to the White House by 77,000 votes from 3 different states. And one of the cohorts that delivered the White House to him was white women. 53% of white women voted for him. But those aren't the ones that really to worry about or be concerned with, because we know where they stand. It's the other 47% who claim to be liberal and allies to women of color, but then don't show up. And I didn't realize it at first, but I was one of them. All of the political work I had been doing, all of the funding I had been doing, almost all of it went to white women. So I realized I needed to make a change. And fortunately for me, I got the opportunity and chance to work with Saira and work with her on her campaign. And I gotta tell you, it was eye-opening, shocking in some ways. So I don't know if you want to jump in at that point.
Yeah, sure. So a little bit of background about me. I used to be a white woman. I didn't realize that I wasn't one until 2 days after the 2016 election. Kind of perfect storm happened in my personal life that I will spare you the details, but I realized that the women that I consider to be my sisters, my family, were actually extremely racist and didn't see me as a brown woman, but saw me as a white woman. And the reason they saw me as such is because I saw myself as such. So when people say personal relationships will save us, that's not true. If that was true, the intellectual sort of conclusion would be men would no longer be sexist if they have daughters, or if they are married to women, or if they have sisters or mothers, and men are not going to be sexist. Obviously, we know that's not true. So anyway, what happened after that is I started just on Facebook. I own a book packaging company. This is one of our books. And that's what I did before. I was politically active like Mel, but I'd never run for office before. And I just started writing about my experiences with white people and white women in particular. And you would have thought that I was, asking people to donate their children's kidneys. Like, people went crazy. And over the course of 2017, I had a lot of opportunities, one of which Mel and I were in the same Electing Women PAC. It should have been called Electing White Women. And I spoke at, I was the token, and so I was asked to speak at things, and I was asked to speak at the end of an event for a white woman senator. And I spoke about how it was incumbent upon white women to reach across the aisle and pull us over because you all have more power. And it really just set the room on fire, and a lot of chattering. I went to DC after that. I met with other white women senators, some of whom recently ran for president. They didn't even know what the difference was between Black and brown women and white women. They were all women, right? It was disgusting, frankly. And Decided at that time that I was done with the Democratic Party, in that, white folks think that being a Democrat immunizes them from white supremacy. They think that living in San Francisco or Austin or New York City immunizes them from white supremacy. White supremacy is not in the water, it is the water. Nobody is immunized. And so I wrote an op-ed in December of 2017 called "I'm a Brown Woman Who's Breaking Up with the Democratic Party." It went totally viral. And I got a lot of, you're a party traitor, and a lot of, we've been done with them for a long time. And then a lot of, why don't you run for office? And I thought that was crazy. Why couldn't we expect more of our representatives? Our congresswoman is a white woman here, Diana DeGette. She's been here for 24 years. She's done nothing. She told a friend of mine, a brown woman friend of mine, that civil rights are not one of her issues. How convenient for her. A bunch of stuff. She did a bunch of stuff. And I thought to myself, look, I have class privilege. I can afford to do this. I can afford babysitters. I'm able-bodied. If not me, then who? And so in January of 2018, I became one of the last people in the country to file with the FEC to run for Congress. And I challenged her. I had 5 months, and Mel came on board to be my head of campaign finance. And that's sort of where we were. So, Mel and I were friends. And so we talked pretty often, and we talked earlier this morning. And with this race to dinner stuff that I do, which is, consumes a lot of my time, something has really struck me. And that is, which is hence the title of the book is White Women, Everything You Already Know About Your Own Racism and How to Do Better. We all know this, but it's the elephant in the room. And so there's, a nice term is cognitive dissonance. Willful ignorance is another term. But you don't know what you don't know. And, I remember Mel was in my dining room, and she just had gotten off the phone, and she said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't think I realized how bad we are." And so if you want to just talk a little bit about what you didn't know and your experiences, Mel.
Yeah. So, when you run for office, you spend almost all day, every day. Oops, sorry about that. All day, every day, on the phone calling donors for money. And I can't tell you how many times on the other end people would say, "Oh, I could think about supporting Saira if she wasn't so angry." And because she talks about race, and she's not any angrier than any one of us who talk about misogyny or some of these other things that are, affecting our lives on a daily basis. And I remember I engaged with one call in particular, and asked her why, no one ever calls me out on being angry when I discuss misogyny and, the Me Too movement and things like that. And I do get pretty angry. And just because Saira was talking about race, why is that? How is that different? How does it make her angry and not me? And I remember having this conversation with Saira. She just said, "Yep, this is every day for me." And so it was pretty eye-opening that I can talk about my truths and what's impacting me in an angrily way, and don't get called out on it. But yet when we talk about race or start to open up that conversation, then it's like no one wants to have that conversation.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, further to that, white women see, and look, we always hear, not all white women, not me. If it doesn't apply to you, keep it moving. But white women see oppression through their own personal experiences of gender, forgetting that Black and brown women also are on the receiving end of systemic sexism and misogyny. On top of it, race, and that's the intersectionality. So we deal with our own men's bullshit. We deal with your men's bullshit, white dudes, and we deal with your bullshit. So we've got layers and layers and layers. And you all, white feminism, people say, what is white feminism? What is white feminism? White feminism is you expecting men to understand how they are oppressing you and being unwilling and unable and angry for us to expect the same of you. So at the core is massive hypocrisy. And so, Mel realized that. What I realized is it was the tip of the iceberg. I don't think I even knew how completely violently racist white women were until I ran for Congress. And to give a little bit color, no pun intended, after I lost, and by the way, there was always a line around the block of white women clutching their pearls, waiting to tell me how I had them all wrong. I had one white woman, very notably, she was like the fourth one who told me that I was really angry. Said, you're very articulate, which is always, whistleblower there, not dog whistle, sorry. But she said, you're very angry. And I said, you know what, with all due respect, I want to give you some free advice. Come up with a different adjective when talking to Black and brown women. And she said, I can say whatever I want to you. I'm an Indian daughter. And I was like, no, you can't. Like, that's not the way it works. So just how deep. And then I'm thinking, your poor Indian daughter, God bless your Indian daughter. But, after I lost, it was white liberals who kept tweeting and writing about me and getting me onto the radar of Breitbart, Fox News, David Duke. I just realized this morning, Richard Spencer is now following me on Twitter, and made my life so dangerous. People were threatening to kill my children, calling my daughter a Muslim cunt. I was getting pictures of Indians defecating on the street. They're going to use my family for target practice. Why? I'm a middle-aged Asian in the Midwest. Like, am I that scary? Like, seriously, look at the situation. If this is so scary to white people, you guys are really scared of your own shadow. And so I had to leave the state with my children for 2 months. And by the way, sure, in some ways it was the Nazis, the Republicans who came for me, but white liberals, white Democrats literally shined their shoes and ironed their clothes before they came after me and my family.
Yeah, and I will say too, I mean, we're talking about sort of the individual donors here too, but I mean, when Saira was running, another big obstacle are the gatekeepers and the political apparatus. And so Saira's running for, a federal level congressional seat, which, you've got your high-end DCCC and, part of that political apparatus. But at the local level, it's made up, this district is made up of lots of smaller districts. And to the degree of which, you have these, I don't know what you call them, like what the judges, or what are they called, Saira? The people who like handle those little districts that would have the, campaign events.
Oh, the captains or something?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Captains. Yeah.
Right. So your local captains. And, as you're in the political season, all candidates who are running for office within that district are invited to speak. And I mean, more often than not, Saira was either not invited or excluded from it. There was one instance where she had been invited. Diana DeGette had 10 minutes to speak to, potential voters. And Saira, I'm not even kidding you, had 45 seconds. So those kinds of things, like we talk about the individual people, but the gatekeepers are also a huge issue to, to moving towards a democracy that can actually be more reflective of the people it serves.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've even forgotten about that, Mel. And there's like, the 45 seconds. There was another instance where I was invited to speak, and it was in front of like 100, folks, mostly white liberals. And I got up to speak, and before I could even say anything, I was the last person. And before I could even say anything, a white woman stood up and had my Huffington Post article in her hand, as if she had discovered King Tut's tomb rather than like downloaded something I myself had written a month earlier. And she starts reading from it. And I mean, the whole room erupts and people start screaming and yelling. And I'm like, oh my God. And nobody is coming to my defense. I mean, it starts to feel a little scary. I'm in the basement of a library, and 2 Latinx women stood up and started screaming for them to stop. And I'm just sitting here and I'm like, this is insane. Like, this is insane. And I had to sit there. I had to stand there and take this abuse, because if I didn't, then I'd be the angry brown woman. And after that, a white woman in the crowd who did not stand up for me in the moment. That's the other thing. Silence. White silence is deadly. So there's texting me, telling me how they support me, but in real life, it's like, white silence. She does a Facebook post afterwards, and she was like one of these higher ups, and she said, oh my God, I literally can't believe what I just saw. I cannot believe, there are 8 candidates who came up here. Not a single one of them talked about race. Brown woman stands up, starts talking, doesn't even say anything, is like indicted just by virtue of something I've written. And she then becomes a pariah. She then becomes a social pariah because she's actually saying something publicly. And so part of this work is like, my partner, Regina Jackson at Race to Dinner, always says to white women, you're not going to gain anything but your freedom. That's it. You're going to lose friends. You might lose your husband. You might lose your wife. You might lose your kids. You might lose your job. This is all in an effort to gain freedom. By the way, all of our liberation is tied together. And until and unless you see that, I, as an Asian woman, see that my liberation is tied to Black women. And so, I've lost these sisters that I was talking about, where I had my grand awakening. No one's speaking to me anymore. People have come for my husband, like I said, people have come for my kids. There's been weaponization of economics here, there, and everywhere. But white women always start with social ghosting, social diminishing. They weaponize social norms against you. And I know you experienced that, Mel, even.
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't even, know what was happening at the time, but I do distinctly remember shortly after I had joined your campaign, going to a large event in the city, filled with like lots of sisters and lots of people I thought were allies and friends, and was completely ostracized just because I had, chosen to, support Saira. I did it very publicly, was very open about it, and, was on her team. And we really thought we were going to go to Washington too. But yeah, this is, I have lost a lot of friends as well. But I mean, the reality is, like, when I opened up and said, like, I was part of that 47% of women that we need, white women that we need to be worried about. I talked the talk, but I wasn't showing up in that way. And so for me, it was, an okay progression, because I need to, I really do believe that we should, from a political standpoint, have a democracy that's more reflective of the people it serves. And to do that, then I have to show up in that way.
Yeah. And, it really, I was sort of blown away. I was told repeatedly by political consultants, stop talking about race, talk about class, frame everything in class. And I'm talking about leftist, Bernie Sanders type people, talk about class. And you look through and you see how everything is framed, right? And I refused to do that. So, we went from 0 to 60, and to give you a sense of how there is an appetite for this, in 5 months, we got, like 40,000 votes. Something like that, but we got 34% of the votes in 5 months against this extremely well-funded, huge amount. And, there was this sort of in the last month when folks were like, you might be able to pull this off. Stop talking about race, just stop. Stop talking about defunding and abolishing ICE, which, by the way, we see what ICE, like the natural conclusion of ICE is forced hysterectomy and 580 children or something being separated from their families. God forbid you talk about abolishing ICE. But begging, stop talking about race. You win, you go to Congress, and then you can talk about anything you want. You all know how that works. You can't do that, because all you do once you get to Congress is keep raising money and raising money and raising money. And even some of our most outspoken, amazing new folks in Congress, like, they've been hemmed in a little bit. And so this is institutional. This is institutional stuff. And you cannot win races, local, state, federal races, without money. And who has the money? Who has the money? White people have the money. And until and unless white people can't die when they hear the term white people, why do you think it is, Mel, that you can talk about white supremacy all you want? Fine. The minute you start talking about white people, there's like a melting down. Why do you think that is?
Generalization, categorizing, labels people don't like to be in.
Because white people have also been the default. So you've always been people. You've been a woman, right? Mm-hmm. I've always been, on a good day, I've been a brown woman or Indian woman. On a bad day, I'm a dirty pocky. I'm a terrorist. I'm the N-word. We've been called everything, right? You all have been so used to being women and people that it feels like, holy shit, white, how dare you? How dare you paint this broad brush? Imagine if the school shooters, all the school shooters for the most part are white dudes, right? Imagine if the school shooters are men who look like my husband, like South Asian, dark-skinned South Asian dudes. They would be charged with terrorism. So even our laws are racialized. you know? And when 9/11 happened, I was at the World Trade Center when 9/11 happened. I was a third-year law student in New York City. I can tell you, all of us became terrorists the next day. Why is it that not all white people are considered terrorists when 90-something% of gun violence in this country, mass gun violence in this country, is by white people? I mean, you start thinking about this and you're like, y'all have gotten away with murder, literally.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? Like, can you want to talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing with Race to Dinner? Because I think it was phenomenal work, but I mean, like, where do you think we go from here?
That's on you. I mean, like, I will say where I think, then this is going to be your sort of long answer, Mel.
Yeah.
We can't fix racism. You can. Like, women can't fix sexism, men can. And so the people who create and benefit systems of oppression have to bring them down. You know, if there was ever a strategy that was going to work, I mean, it would have happened by now. From my perspective, we need you all to start seeing how your interests are aligned with ours and your liberation is tied to ours, and get your hands dirty. This is not our problem. Mm-mm. You know, you all created it. So I think the question is for you. What do you think?
I mean, I think I think, you know, from an individual perspective, you know, you got to pay a lot more attention to this stuff that's systemic. It's in every institution, in our schools, the way our kids are being educated, in our political system, in our businesses. It's top down. And so it feels like it can be a huge undertaking, but we've got to find, you know, areas where we can make a difference. Our criminal system. I mean, like, don't even get me started on that. It's just every institution within this country is based on, you know, white people and white, you know, mostly laws written by white men for white men, and nothing has changed. And I think that, you know, there are so many places to start, but I think you're 100% right. It's on us to sort of first, you know, do the hard work within and realize how we are as individuals are contributing to this and what we're doing and how we can change within ourselves, and then start working out into our community. But I think it has to start with within.
Yeah. And, you know, every day on social media, it's like you see another video of a white woman doing something horrible. And you see people of color feeling more emboldened right now, even less so now than even 6 weeks ago. You see how quickly that goes away, talking about how a television set has been toxic or a certain college has been toxic. And then everything becomes personalized, right? It's that woman. What's wild to me is watching white women call other white women Karen, and white men calling white women Karen. No. You're all Karens, you know, and all the white men are Chads. And as a Black male friend of mine said he fears white women almost more than anyone. I mean, we know the history of white women calling out rape with Black men and Black men getting lynched. But he said the way he sees it is, you know, white men are going out to battle every day to fuck everything up. And white women are literally having sex with them, raising their kids, making their dinners, you know, giving them back massages, like enabling them. They're enabling them. And so, with Race to Dinner, we get really sort of in the weeds about this. And I would say, like, having done enough dinners now with women in Canada, you know, Greenwich, Connecticut, Chicago, all over Colorado, you're the same everywhere. It is the same everywhere. And the number one thing that needs to happen before, you can't have systemic change until you have what you just said, change within. White women have to start loving themselves and loving each other. Until and unless you all are wedded to this notion of perfection, perfect bodies, perfect hair, perfect face, perfect husband, perfection. So when you try to be perfect, which is obviously, there's no objective standard except for whiteness. That's the first. I can't be perfect because I'm not white. And in fact, true to form, people said when I was running for Congress, oh my God, she's like pedigreed. I went to a top college and law school. I clerked, you know, on a federal court of appeals. I worked at the top law firm in the world. I was a published novelist by the time I was 29, you know, so on and so forth. And they would say to me, Saira's not qualified. I lacked one qualification, and that's the only qualification I lacked. But it is, you all hate yourselves and hate each other. So it's perfection, competition. if all you're doing from morning till night, and you all know what I'm talking about, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You talk bad, and I used to be one of you, so I know intimately how it goes. The minute someone's out of the room, she's fat, or she's too skinny. Is she eating too much, or is she not eating enough? I mean, like, is she anorexic? We hear her husband's fucking around with so and so and so and so. I think her kid seems like they have they're dyslexic. It's so awful. Your entire culture is around stabbing each other in the back. And so I was a part of that completely. And I realized, talking about losing things, what I have gained, almost all of my friends now are Black and brown women. And I never worry that anyone's talking shit about me behind my back, because everyone says it to my face. And I never talk shit about anyone behind their back. Like, it doesn't even occur to me, because why would you be friends with somebody that you feel unkind towards, and vice versa? Why are you going to be friends with somebody that you know is saying these things? And so I feel like I've gained everything, and I've had to go through this, experience of profound grief and loss. But that's it. Once you all can start being in community with each other, then you're not going to be our ally, you'll be our accomplice. We don't need your allyship. Is white saviorism, and white saviorism is white supremacy. We don't need you all to swoop in and save anything. We need you to actually start loving yourselves for who you are, accepting yourselves for who you are, get rid of all these notions of perfectionism, which is a whole industry to make you feel bad and to make you feel like you're not good enough, and be in real community with each other. And that's a hard, anytime we do these race to dinners, Mel, the women say at the end, what you asked, where do we go from here? What can we do? And they want to hear, read this book, read these 3 books, watch this movie, take this workshop. When we say this, it's almost like, fuck, because it requires you to change your entire lives. And that is what people of color do our lives are very different from your lives. And so it almost feels insurmountable. I think that's, how do you do that? But once you have this flip switch in your brain, I promise you won't even want to be around these people. You're not going to want to sit around and talk about, like, are you going to buy the Peloton bike, or are you going to vacation in the Bahamas this year, or Hawaii? I mean, it's not going to even cross your mind and I don't know. Once you change it here and change it between yourselves, things will then change. I don't think you can have policy change really necessarily until you have cultural change. I mean, I guess it's like this.
Mm-hmm. All connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what was, we talked a lot about sort of the race, the obstacles. What was most surprising for you? I mean, I know you went through hell after the race. It was horrible. But like during the whole campaigning, what was most surprising for you as a candidate?
I mean, aside from the race stuff, how all of this is just sales and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we put politicians on a pedestal for having something or whatever, and it's literally a sales and marketing job. So to the extent that any of you want to run for office, you should do it. There's nothing unique about it. If you can sell a mask, you can sell yourself into any place. And that to me felt empowering. I don't know, it just takes the preciousness out of it. And then you see, like we saw last night, how the default is for white men. And we have 2, old white male racists and rapists. Those are our choices. The bar's underground for white men. And again, white women make them possible, make the 2 that we saw on stage possible. I mean, everyone feels so bad for Melania Trump. Why? I mean, she is benefiting so much, and she could have blown the whole thing up. Melania Trump could have saved all of us from this shit, and she chose not to. Instead, she wore a jacket that said, "I don't really care, do you?" When all this stuff with the separation at the border happened. I see some questions here, Mel, for you.
Oh, where do you see them?
She says, hold on, in the chat, let's see. Question, Melanie, how has this changed you in terms of loving yourself?
Oh, I love that question. I think I had a lot of white guilt, right? So I felt guilty for my privilege. I always understood that my life was different and I had opportunities that a lot of people don't have, right? I raised my kids differently than women of color have to raise their kids. It's just, so I've already always recognized that, and I had a lot of guilt from that. And so I think I've learn to forgive myself for that once you start really walking the walk a little bit more, and not just talking the talk. Then I think from that perspective, and losing some friends, like Saira mentioned, like I lost a lot of my network as well, that I worked really hard to maintain and nurture. And at the end of the day, it's like when you start to realize that your values aren't aligned, then you choose differently. You choose to have people in your life that add value and not suck value.
I love what you just said, Mel, because white guilt without action is white supremacy, because you're then again centering your own feelings. And the fact that you moved through that into action is like, that's another thing. Like guilt gets you nowhere, right? Like feeling badly, I can't tell you. And by the way, I just finished writing chapter 3 of this book, which is about my personal experiences as a white woman at a sorority at UVA, and how much time is spent making white women feel better about their guilt. And that's suck, we're even brought in to make you all feel better about that. And so get rid of the guilt. Like have it, if you need it to propel you into action, absolutely. But having it sit in your life is just another form of white supremacy, which is like a hard thing to even wrap your mind around. By the way, I also want to flag that like I'm on the receiving end of racialized oppression, but I'm also on the giving end, right? Because there's an ecosystem. And so one thing that happens at all of our Race to Dinners, we always ask at the beginning, Regina asks, how many of you in this room are racist? For the most part, it's none, right? And then she'll say, okay, how many of you would trade places with us? And nobody ever has lied about that, 0. So it's been hundreds of women now, not a single, they're not racist, but they wouldn't trade places with us. And then I'll say, okay, gun to your head, you have to trade place with the Indian woman or the Black woman. Who would you trade places with? 100% would trade places with me. So we know the hierarchy. White is at the top, Black is at the bottom, and everyone else is in between. And so I too have been, marinating in this for a long time. And so I can be on the receiving end of racism from white people and on the giving end of anti-Black racism. So I'm working on dismantling that in my own life. What does that look like for me? I too was raised in this culture where Black men are scary, lock the door when a Black person is walking down the street. God forbid a Black person is wearing a hoodie and walking down the street, family members saying you can marry anyone you want. And in India, there's institutional Islamophobia as well. So you can marry anyone you want as long as they're not Muslim, not Black, and God forbid a Black Muslim. And so this is stuff that I've been, dealing with my whole life too. And I have these very difficult conversations with my own family members, and it's not easy. And many of them are not speaking to me anymore. And that's okay. I mean, I do think that that's, in terms of moving forward, aside from like change, not aside from, in conjunction with being in community together, really becoming comfortable with like being by yourself and like, and not needing a ton of external noise or whatever, because this can be very solitary work and you need a community of people to support you. But being okay with not having this cousin not speak to me, or having this, aunt over here, or an in-law in my case, who thinks I'm like a monster and the equivalent of David Duke or something. So I would say that that's it. I'm looking at, there's a bunch of questions coming into this chat. Should we just want to read through them?
Sure. I can't access it, so if you can see it,
Saira, you mentioned I was like that, like the white women criticized. I'm curious about what changed for you to change that about yourself. Recognizing, I spent my whole life trying to assimilate. That's what I'm, first generation. So assimilation meant, it was very clear, it was never explicitly stated in my house, but assimilation meant assimilating to white culture, not Black culture. And so what does that mean? Make myself as white as possible. So I was captain of the field hockey, basketball, lacrosse team. I was president of my school. I joined an almost all white sorority at the University of Virginia. So I did all the white things to be one of you. And what that meant is talking shit about my friends, and like, or, you know, more often than not, sitting in silence when other people were talking shit and saying deeply, deeply unkind things about each other. And I remember one time, it was just a particularly like, I mean, I couldn't even, I was even surprised by the amount of horrible, like, it was over the course of like a happy hour, and one of our friends wasn't there. And over the course, she was, let's see, accused of having become anorexic, having a daughter who was dyslexic, having a husband who is an alcoholic, who was likely cheating on her. I mean, I was just like, oh my God. And at the end of it, I said, guys, like, this just feels really extreme. And they all looked at me and started laughing, and they go, well, I mean, you know that she does this to you when you're not around too. And it kind of hit me. I'm like, oh my God, this is literally what we do. This is how we spend our time. When we go out for dinner, we talk shit about our husbands. You know, we come back and we're really nice to our husbands. Everything is catty, catty, catty. So when I left, I mean, it really took me losing, and I'm saying losing, and my mom died 8 years ago, and I moved to Colorado to be with these women. These women were my family. It took me losing in my mind, really everything, almost everything, and rebuilding. And it has been hard as hell. Like, I've been broken. Parents at my kids' schools don't talk to me. My children have been, you know, they're social, like, they don't get invited to stuff. Signs get stolen out of my yard all the time. My husband, I mean, people have tried to ruin my husband's like businesses. You know, it's like, it's not awesome, or it hasn't been awesome. And now I'm just seeing the other side. And it has taken a total death of my former life to get to this other side. But that's, I mean, and that sounds really scary. I know that sounds really scary, but that's what it is. I mean, being able to let go of all those things. But it's been now 4 years. It's been almost exactly 4 years. And I will say it's, I mean, what has happened, so much has happened during that time. In some ways, this congressional run, I'm like, what? Wait, what? That was 2 years ago. It feels like it was 20 years ago in some ways. All right, hang on. White women, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Are there any other questions? I'm looking. I don't think, can people speak up, or is it just through the chat? Let's see. Oh, thoughts on what to do, act in, what comes after the book. There's a movie also in the works called Deconstructing Karen. I'll let you know when that's going to be out, potentially an off-Broadway play as well. I'll tell you, like, I think that these dinners have been a revelation for these women. I mean, aside from the sort of, you know, usually one person at the dinner will cry and get angry, it's blah, blah, blah. But I don't think you all have had this opportunity to have this kind of self-reflection. And actually, for all the dinners, the women have to know each other in some context, either through work or friends or acquaintances or book clubs, because the work has to continue with yourselves. There is sort of most vocally, this one woman in Denver last December said, she's a doctor in Denver, and she said, I feel like the weight of the world has been lifted off my shoulders, because she looked at me and Regina and she said, okay, I'm going to stop. Like, all these people were like, that's not true. That's not true. And she looked at us and she said, I don't see your children as equal to my children. And I don't see your grandchildren, Regina, as equal to my children. I don't. And all these other women go, oh, and we were like, thank you. We know that. We know that. We know all of you feel that way. And thank you for saying it. And she just said, I feel like the weight of the world is off my shoulders. I feel like I can actually start, like, you know, dismantling. And that crew meets once a month now. Instead of book club, they meet to talk about how their racism shows up in their life. And they've been doing it now for 11 months. That's amazing. That's like and that's accountability, and that is being in community together. And I think that's great. All right, let's see. There's one last thing. What advice do you have for those of us who live and work in predominantly white communities to diversify our social environments? I mean, we're in a predominantly white community here in Denver. and I hate to say this, I think diversity and inclusion is another puppet of white supremacy. It's airdropping brown and black people into your community to make you feel like you're experiencing something. This is back to, even especially in all white environments, it's very important for you to diversifying is easy. What's not easy is what I've just been saying, is like changing the dynamic that you have with yourself and changing the dynamic you have with other white people. That's where you start. We talk to companies and they hate to hear this, like diversifying your workforce and airdropping black and brown people into white supremacy culture. That's why you see people black and brown people come to companies and then they leave within 6 months to a year because it's not safe. So the work has to happen internally, and then you can talk about diversifying. But having a black friend or a brown friend or moving to a neighborhood where there's like, you know, some black and brown people is not the answer. The answer is changing culturally how you are with each other and with yourself. Let's see. All right.
I think there's a question about when your book is coming out too.
As soon as I can write it. So they're trying to fast track it. So we're writing it as, you know, as quickly as we possibly can. No sooner than, you know, I think this time next year. But in the meantime, there's a book. Let me see if I can put this. Lots of people ask about what they can do for their kids, and Mel, this goes for yours as well. There's a book coming out on December 1. Here, I'll put it in chat, called, here it is. It's called The Black Friend on Being a Better White Person. And here it is. And I'm a contributor there, along with I feel very honored to have been asked, with some extremely notable people, as well as like Angie Thomas, who wrote The Hate You Give. Fred Joseph is the author of it, and he's an amazing black guy in New York City. And he really breaks down, like, kind of step by step, what white folks can do. It's targeted towards middle school and high school and college white folks. I've read an advanced copy. I would highly recommend it for anyone. It's really conversational. He's so funny too. It's a great book. Do you not see it, Rebecca? It's called The Black Friend on Being a Better White Person, How to Be a Better White Person. I just put it in the chat. You can pre-order it there. And if anybody is interested in connecting with Fred over Zoom, like a school or a school district, I can make an introduction, because I think he's lining up Zooms with people. So that'll be December 1. And then I think our book will be out. I mean, my best guess, just knowing how slowly publishing works, even when they're fast tracking, is hopefully in time for Christmas next year. And hopefully the movie will be out before that. But go to racetodinner.com and you can hit the discussion group. And here, I'll put that in the chat. We have a Patreon. So
Jen just did.
Okay, Regina and I, it's not, let me see where let me open the link. If you open racetodinner.com, I think it's the top left-hand corner, it says Race to Dinner discussion group. Just sign up for the Patreon. I think you can even sign up for like $12 a month or something. Our advice is for white women to do that, get like a friend or two to do it with you. And we have different topics. So this month actually is the 19th Amendment and voting, and white women and voting in elections. And every month is different. So we did one on anti-Blackness. We've done one on indigenous erasure. I think we're going to do one on Asian model minority. And so you have consistent content that you're all reading and can have conversations around it. And it's also like, it's not having to read a whole book, you know, it's reading like 3, 4, 5 articles, and there's some videos and stuff in there. So I would definitely sign up for that. All right, Jen.
Well, that was amazing. Thank you. I have so many quotes. I don't know if you can see this through the weird screen. All I've been doing is like frantically taking notes. Thank you so much for sharing this with us and being really honest and just like saying the shit rather than showing up and trying to make people feel good. So I really appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability and your willingness to be here today with us. So thank you for that. We will be putting this recording on the We Are Changemakers platform. We'll again share all the links from Race to Dinner. Also, link to the book and your upcoming book as soon as we have things on that. So
and
yeah,
then Jen, I
thank you
put
so
up my
much for being here.
my Twitter account too, because as I think you follow me, I talk a whole lot of stuff about race. I was gonna say I talk a whole lot of shit about race. So
perfect. Yeah, I'll make sure to share that to you. So in the next couple days, we'll be sharing all of this and we'll post all the links. So thank you for being here. We are going to have a break till 1 o'clock. So I hope that everyone has time to eat some food, drink some water, rest a little bit, and come back for our afternoon session. So thank you so much, Saira and
Thanks,
Mel.
Mel. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.